let's move back up into doing her forearms and upper arms. Now if you recall on the upper arm, the skin on both sides is pretty much just parallel, and you're aiming for the inside and outside of this armhole. So let's do the inside one together here on her skin. So this is just coming up and it's aiming for right there. The first thing we need to know is we want to know how wide is her forearm and upper arm down in this area. So as a beginner, let's go ahead and just measure straight from this and use that measurement. And then you can come back and just double check the total width versus her arms. So we can see this will be here and here. So now we can come here to the inside of her forearm, and this is going to go right up to the inside of that armhole circle. So that'll be from here heading right up to that armhole circle. The first part of the arm you see. The second part here is actually like a see-through view. So you would draw this part in darker, but this part here would just be like dotted. So for instance, if it was a see-through view, I would just be going like that, heading back for this. The outside one, if you remember, these are parallel moving upwards. So it's just moving up and it curves into her shoulder. So following this, going parallel, coming up, curving into her shoulder. And let's do the other side as well. So this is going to curve up into the shoulder, and eventually it'll turn into her trapezius muscles. The next thing we're going to do is her forearms. So basically the forearm on the other side of this joint is about the same size it was above. So you can see here's how wide it was up here, about the same width coming back down here. Then the forearm is going to connect back into the wrist. So the top of the forearm is going to be that plain heart shape we had talked about here, and we had done some practice ones. So let's try it over here. So it's just this very simple plain heart shape coming down into the wrist. The underside of her forearm, though, is doing the sweetheart shape. So it pops out first, and then it quickly comes back to the wrist. As long as your wrist is this 1/4 of a hand total. So make sure you double check that your wrist is not getting too thick. And then let's do the other side. So the top of her forearm, plain heart shape, coming back to the wrist. The bottom one, sweetheart shape. Now the transition between the upper arm and forearm is going to be similar to what we've been doing here at the waist. So the outside of the waist edges here, the outside of the knees down here, we're curving in. We're going to do the same thing here on the outside of her arm. So this will curve in and connect back to the upper arm. Curving in, connecting back to the upper arm. For the inside, there's a little elbow joint. But what you can do is you can have half of this heading this way, half of this heading that way. So you just have like a corner somewhere here in the middle of the joint area. So again, half of this is heading this way, half is going back that way. So you can see there's kind of a little corner on her arm right in that area. Inside corners here, outside corner there. And it's very, very subtle. Now let's switch to our number 2 pencils, and we'll darken this in a little more. And this is your chance to just look back on it. Do the arms look even? Do you like how they look? For me, I feel like this arm got a little bit thick, so I'm going to go ahead and just trim out a little bit while I also come back and darken this in. Now the same thing that we've been doing here at the knees and the waist, I want to see these elbow joint areas. So go ahead and come back and darken in the bottom of that cylinder and the top of this cylinder, and then we'll shade this in. And we'll do the same thing on the other side. Down here in the wrist area, what's going to happen is the top outside edge of her wrist is where the bone sticks out a little bit, and then the inside is just curving in. So on these wrists, you're going to do the opposite. So here it was the outside of the waist, the outside of the arm, the outside of the knee, were all curving in. Now we're going to do the inside of the wrist to the hand is going to curve inwards, curving in. You can practice it here and here. And then the outside of her wrist will have that little bump before it transitions into her hand. So there's a little bump heading outwards, then it becomes her hand. And then again, we want to emphasize the areas that bend. So come in here and make the bottom of the forearm cylinder and the top of the hand, and then we'll darken in the joint area. So you can see all the different locations where she bends. Before we come up here to start adding our guidelines for the face as well as plotting in her neck, I'm noticing on mine that just this leg feels skinnier than this one, and I feel like this leg just got a little bit too wide. So what I want to do is I would just want to come back and just double check my measurements to see if I was off a little bit. So again, this is 4 heads tall, and this should be to one side 3/4 of a head, and I feel like it's a little too big. So I'm going to come back up here to my head measurement, and I'll get that 3/4. And then I want to double check from the plumb line along 4. And yes, I am noticing that it's a titch too wide over here. And I can take that, compare back to the other side, and I can see I made a mistake right in this area. So what I'm going to do is I've plotted my new location here, and I know that the, I'll double check up here, so this should be half of a head, half of a head. So this is correct up here. So I'll come in here and I'll erase this part of her leg. And then with my 1H or 2H pencil, I'll come in and lightly do the correction. And then I'll go back to my darker pencil, and I can fix here on the outside edge of her swimsuit. And then taking a look at her leg, I like the curve that I did, so I'm going to just follow that and make it darker. I notice also sometimes what helps is I will take this and look at it from the back side, so I'll hold it up to like a light or something. Here, I'll show you now. So sometimes what I'll do is I want to look at something flopped and I'll pick out mistakes right away. So sometimes I'll take my artwork and I'll turn it over and I'll hold it up to like a window or hold it up to the light. So for instance, I have a light table here. I could bring it in and now it's flipped over. So then I can quickly see with my eye if anything looks asymmetrical or uneven. And so you can do a lot of catches like that as well when you see your drawing from both sides. Now these guidelines here, we're going to want to keep those nice and dark here inside the body. So come down to your 2 1/4, which is going to be the apex of her bust, and let's make that dark inside the body here. 2, this is the bottom of the armhole, and 1 1/2 again, this is her shoulders. Later on, what we're going to do is I'm going to show you what to do with the apex of the bust, and also a few little tricks here with drawing the armpits and stuff. But we'll get to that later. Also, for the beginning croquis, the static pose, we don't have to draw the hands. I just want to have correct guides on here so everything's perfect in its place. We're going to do the same thing with the face up here. We're going to get all of the guides in there before you draw a face and leave it at that. So for the static croquis, you don't have to do faces or hands, but you do have to do the layouts for them. So that's the last thing that we have left to do here, is to do the face. Up here on the face, we made some notes on half face, 3/4, 3/8, but we no longer need these now because we're going to actually start doing the layouts for the face itself. What we want to do is we want to erase some of this information, but we want to keep these locations here in the middle of the face. So taking your 2H or 1H art pencil or a mechanical pencil, let's go ahead and start to do the correct guidelines for the face. Now we already have the eye line, and we want the eye line to go all the way across the whole face. And remember, we've already drawn the nose and the bottom of the bottom lip. The next thing we're going to want is in between the nose and the bottom of the bottom lip, we want the center of the mouth. Eventually, we want the center of the mouth because we're going to start drawing in her jawline. So again, in between the tip of the nose, bottom of her bottom lip, halfway in between there is going to be the center of her mouth, and bring that all the way out to the edges. The next thing we want to know is how wide her chin is, how wide her mouth is. So the only way to get that is we have to plot the eyes and get our V back in here. So get your center pupil, and then halfway to the outside is the outside edge, and halfway to the inside is the inside edge. And those are the plot marks again for her eyes. Then you want to take the outside edge, connect that back to the chin at the center of the face. And now we know how wide the center of the mouth is. And remember what you do to find out how wide the chin is. You split the mouth in half. So we want half of this, half of that. And you come straight down. That's how wide the chin is. Then the chin is going to connect to the jawline and back out here to the temple, so the widest part of her face. So go ahead and do an angle heading for the jawline and an angle coming back out to there. If you need to, you can practice on your girl right here. So it's jaw coming out, jawline, back to the temple. And do the same thing for the other side. So starting at your new chin width, come out to the jawline and start to head back for the temple. For the hairline, remember we come up halfway to find her forehead, and then we split this in half again to find the hairline. So here we are, from the eye line to the top of the skull. Halfway is the forehead, and then again halfway is the hairline. And then the same distance of her hairline to the top of the skull, you'll want to repeat that heading upwards. And this will be the top of her hair style. Then the next thing we want to know is how wide is that hairstyle coming off of her face? And it's 1 eye width. So if you come in here and you get the outside edge of an eye and the inside corner of an eye, we can get the full eye width to one side, from the side of the face out to the other side. And then now we know that that hairstyle is going to aim for this, dropping down with gravity. And again, what we're putting in here is just what her maximum hair style would fit inside of these basic guidelines. To give this a little more context, let's go ahead and also put her ears inside of there. So it's going to start from the eye line, heading upwards, coming back down and stopping above the tip of the nose. And then this hairline would eventually start to angle back for the temple at the side of the face. And then let's go ahead and darken in a few key locations. So I want to know where my pupil is, the inside corner, outside corner of my eyes, as well as the tip of the nose, bottom of the bottom lip. And we'll make the center of the mouth darker, but only for the width of the mouth. So it's just from here to here. Now I can come in, and if I like my jawline, I feel like I did a good job of drawing that, I'll darken it in exactly as it is. If there's something you want to fix on it, go ahead and fix it first lightly, and then we'll darken it in. I'll go ahead and do mine now. And I'll just darken in her ears a little bit as well. Now, as you remember, we want to find the outside edges of her neck, and those line up right here with the iris. So you remember you have the outside edge of the iris, and then it comes down, lines up with the outside edge of the neck. The trick is you have to draw the iris and everything in here first to find where that is. When I'm working at this little tiny scale right here, I basically already know that the iris is going to be in between the outside corner and the pupil itself. And at this scale, it's so tiny, it's just in between those two. So I can find that location. And then following perfectly with the plumb line, so this is square with her whole body, I can come from what's a basic guess on the iris, and I can come down here to get her neck. And for now, the neck that we're doing is just a straight line, straight down. And it's going to be similar to her upper arm where these are parallel. The neck itself is just going to be parallel as well. So let's do that again. This is the outside corner of her eye. That's the pupil. In between those two, you can come straight down, following the plumb line, so you're totally square. And then at the level right here of her jawline, you can come down. So again, all we need is from the jaw down to the shoulders. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to round this off at the bottom. So it's actually going to look similar to a dress form. And maybe I'll show a picture of a dress form neck. So coming over here, what you can do is, remember our trapezius muscles was aiming for this point here, and this was basically 1 1/4. You can make a circle fitting inside of this area, and it will give you an idea for doing your neck curving back to the shoulder level, down here and here as well. And again, this is right at the shoulder at 1.5 heads down. You can erase this extra corner here and here. So you can see the neck is coming down, and it looks just like on your dress form. And we want to go back and we want to fix getting the trapezius muscles in here. And remembering that the neck is in front, so this you would draw last. So we're going to connect from the shoulder, heading back to that location, but once you get to the neck, you stop right there, because this is going behind the neck. Now remember on our girl that her trapezius muscle sticks out quite a bit further like this, and mostly because she's a swimmer athlete. A lot of girls, their neck will come down and the trapezius muscle will be somewhere inside of here. The reason why we're making ours so low and the neck so long is because for fashion, you need room for drawing collars, and if you're going to do a mock, turtleneck or a big turtleneck or something really big and flowy, you need some room in here to do those details. Just like we need room all along the different hem lengths in her legs. Some people, what they'll do is they'll make the trapezius muscles aim just a little bit higher back up into here. And I know some designers also will make the shoulders just a little bit wider than this. So it's up to you on your preferences, but for now, stick with these guidelines as a rule as a beginner. So for me, taking just one last look at my girl, I feel like my shoulders are definitely just a little too narrow. Basically like the thickness of a pencil, I want to move them out a little bit. So I'll do a real quick fix right now. And I think that's good enough for now. Now that you've completed the demo with me, I want you to scan this and turn this in as part of your homework for taking notes during the video, as well as show me the backside where you took notes on drawing cylinders correctly when they're going at an angle, and this one was drawn incorrectly. And then moving on, so this was page 5 and this is page 6. On page 6, you're going to do 2 more static poses side by side. So it should look like this. 1, 2, 3.